Driver accidentally saw something he shouldn't have seen. Then he subconsciously touched the corners of his eyes and the back of his head to ease the embarrassment. But this strange action attracted the attention of the boss, David. He asked him what he had seen, and Jack, in order to keep his hard-earned job as a chauffeur, he immediately stretched out his little hand and pointed out the window. He said, "Boss, look at that tree. It's as tall as Lord Shiva. What I did just now was to honor God and pray for 100 years of happiness for you and your wife." Then he repeated the gesture again, seeing Jack's devotion. David's American girlfriend, Mary, was convinced. She immediately learned from Jack. Seeing the two of them repeating such a funny action, Jack felt that he was really a clever little man. But just as he'd been relying on his cleverness to get by in David's household, Mary killed a little girl in a drunk driving accident. When David's father found out, he called Jack into his room. Without saying a word, he handed him a confession. Looking at the plea, Jack knew right away. He knew he was being made a scapegoat. As a driver, he had no right to refuse. He could only tremblingly sign his name on the confession. After that, Jack lived every day in fear. He even dreamed of being arrested in jail. But half a month went by, and the police still didn't come. It wasn't until Mary asked a friend for information that she found out the little girl she'd run over was a low-species orphan. No one cared if she lived or died. Jack breathed a sigh of relief when he found out he wasn't going to jail. And before he could rejoice, he was kicked in the face by Papa David. Mary says, "Why the fuck did you kick him?" And David's father said, "Because he's no longer useful." And David's father doesn't think of Jack as a human being. Mary couldn't take it anymore, so she flew back to the States overnight while everyone was asleep. And when David found out the next day that Mary had left, David took all his anger out on Jack. He said, "Why the fuck didn't you watch her?" Jack said, "It's not my fault, sir." David says, "It's all your fault, you poor bastard." Jack says, "Sir, calm the fuck down." And he pushed him. David said, "I should have fucking sent you to jail." When he heard that, Jack finally realized, even though David was highly educated in the US, he still couldn't get rid of the Indians' deep-rooted concept of caste. So he made up his mind to make sure that David and his family paid the driver gives the gas station guy a tip every time he fills up his tank, in exchange for higher invoices. Then he took these invoices to his rich boss David for reimbursement. Not only that, Jack would secretly drive David's car after work every day to solicit customers. In just 1 month, he saved up $10,000, but he couldn't do anything with it, because if a low-caste person wants to get a foothold in a country with a strict caste system, he must have at least $1 million. One day David was in a hurry to go to the bathroom. He handed Jack his red purse, which he never left without. But when Jack opened the zipper with curiosity and took a closer look, he was amazed at the amount of money in the bag. He said, "My God, I couldn't make this kind of money if I worked all my fucking life." Jack was a little impressed, but he put the money back, because he knew that from the day he became David's chauffeur. His family was under the watchful eye of David's bodyguards. If he did anything that would penalize David, the bodyguards would send Jack's family to heaven on the spot. For the sake of his family's safety, Jack had to restrain himself from paying attention to the red purse every day. But ever since he realized that the bag contained money, Jack's eyes were always glancing upwards, and this subtle movement could not escape David's eyes. So he secretly interviewed the new driver while Jack was resting. Unexpectedly, Jack saw the scene. Realizing that he might lose his job as a driver, Jack was furious. He randomly grabbed a beer bottle and banged it. Then he hid the broken bottle in the trunk. Then he took out a rag and cleaned all the fingerprints out of the car. Then he drove to pick up David as usual. But halfway there, it suddenly started to rain. Jack pulled over to the side of the road. Then he sent David to heaven on the pretext that he needed to change a tire. After sunrise, Jack fled to another city with a purse containing $4 million. He paid half of the money to the directors of the local Industrial and Commercial Bureau and the Public Security Bureau. With the help of the two directors, Jack was able to set up a cab company. And after he shared his experience as a driver with his employees, the quality of cab service in the whole city improved by leaps and bounds. This also made Jack, who was originally a low-caste man, become an entrepreneur who could compete with the high-caste people. Awesome. This kid is awesome.